Here are 10 more predictions for World Games 2025, looking at the heavyweight and super heavyweight categories across the men and the women. So, starting with women's heavyweight, this is the 69 kilo and 76 weight classes grouped together. And we have Clara Perraud, 5'6", 7.5" in the 76s, European champion from the 76s. Again, this is going to be the nomination list in order of their best GL-based performances. So it's going to slightly differ to what the nominated order is. Annie Nelson, next up with 550 at 69, coming 5th at this most recent Worlds. Then just 2.5 kilos above that, we have Marte Chenner, multiple-time Worlds podium finisher, European champion from this year, and placed 6th at Worlds, just behind Annie. 552.5 is the total she's set to win, Euros I believe it was. And another 69 lifter who's very close to that, Gabby Martinez, 553, which she did at Pierre Nats back in 2024, I believe, because she lost this year to Celine Crum. But yeah, all of those three 69 kilo ladies are literally within a few kilos of one another, so it's going to be very hard to pick who's going to podium out of them three. But I say who's going to podium because the top two nominations are pretty far in front. You have Carlina Tongatea, who of course is the 76 kilo reigning world champion, reigning world record holder, and pretty far above the rest in terms of GL points. And Carola Gara is another step above that yet again. The absolute legend of the sport, 69 kilo lifter, 588.5 is her best total that she did at Worlds this year, where she placed second behind Agatha Shitko, so slightly overshadowed by the fact that she got beaten by a almost 63 kilogram Agatha, but she did in fact PB her performance, and she is closing in on becoming the second woman to total 600 at 69. So as far as my predictions, this was a very tough one to pick, I'm not going to lie, as far as who's going to make podium. I'm going with Gabby Martinez, but honestly, between her, Annie, and Marte Chenner, it could go either which way. They are both literally all three of them are literally within 3 kilos of one another, and they all have roughly the same deadlifts as well, around that 230 to maybe 240 range on a great day. So I don't know who's going to be pulling last, but out of those three of them, it seems like Gabby Martinez's training is going the best, or based on what they're all showing us. So I'm going to pick Gabby to take the win here, although, like I said, I'm not super confident with this, and I could see it going either one of the other two possibilities. But Carola Gara and Carlina Tongatea, I think, go 1 and 2, and they get the gold and the silver respectively for Italy and New Zealand. Again, this is pretty easy to predict now, as opposed to Gabby Martinez making podium, because it would be a pretty huge upset if Carola and Carlina do not finish in the gold and silver positions respectively, given the spacing that is between them in terms of GL points. So those are my heavyweight women's predictions. On to men's heavyweight. So we have Faris Espoui, 105 lifter who placed 5th at Worlds this year. Walter Carriazo, another very strong 105 lifter. Now, his best total did come at Canadian Nationals, I believe it was last year, but he has unfortunately been injured, or was pretty heavily injured in his last Worlds performance, where he finished, I believe, in 8th or 9th. So hopefully he's in better shape. Based on his training, he's looking better, although, we'll have to see what he can put up on the day. Christian Ayndokun, 93 lifter, who came very close to pulling off a shocking upset to make the podium at Worlds this year, and almost knocked off Jonathan Kaiko, of all people, to finish in 3rd place. He narrowly missed that world record deadlift on his final attempt to beat Jonathan Kaiko and finish in bronze this year. That would have given him an 894 total. So 878.5 is his best performance ever, but his strength looks like it is definitely beyond that, in the 880s, 890s potentially, and that makes him a pretty strong podium threat. Above him though, we have Emil Norling, 935 is his best total, 105 lifter, multiple time European champion, former world champion as well, and he put up a PB performance at Worlds this year to finish in bronze. 935 was only 5.5 kilos below the world record going into Worlds. Obviously it's now been knocked knocked out of the park by Anthony McNaughton and what he did. But Emil Norling is looking stronger than ever. And with that huge final pool that he has, you can almost guarantee he's going to be loading up for podium, you would think anyway. Above him though, just slightly above him, is his perpetual rival Anatoly Novopesmeni, absolute legend, 3-time world champion in 2 different weight classes, held world records in 2 different weight classes. He held the 105 world record for quite a few years, up until Anthony McNaughton finally broke it at Worlds this year. 937.5, that is his best ever GL point-based performance, which obviously the meat being scored on GL points is what I'm showing you. Although he has totaled 940.5, which is the world record that he had that stood for that long. He just did that at a slightly higher body weight. But Emil Norling is now closing in very closely to that. And it seems like both these gentlemen, the top end is about that 930, 940 range. And it's going to be another Emil versus Anatoly battle here to make the podium. Maybe even win. Who knows? I don't think they'll be contending for the win though, because in first nomination, and again he's quite a ways up from the rest of them, Gustav Hedlund 915 as a 93, which puts him quite up there with the GL points. Obviously former world champion, Sheffield champion, world record holder, Gustav is absolute legend in the 93 kilo weight class, and he is pretty heavy favorite here for the men's heavyweight category. So it would take a pretty big upset for anyone off the 105s or even Christian Eindhoven to pull above him, although they all have bigger deadlifts, but Gustav's lead is going to be a bit too much on the day, I would think. Now the big storyline with Gustav is obviously we all know what happened with Russ at NAPFs. He broke the world record on his first time out as a 93, totaled 918 to beat Emil Krastev's world record by half a kilo. So the storyline heading into here is, can Gustav break Russ's world record? And can he secure a Sheffield wildcard as well? Obviously, it hasn't been confirmed, but you would think Russ has put himself in a very strong position to get that Sheffield invite. There are only 2 wildcards to give out for the men, another 2 for the women. So if Russ has one of those positions securely locked in, you would think that Gustav would have to best that performance to get the wildcard spot. It would be awesome to see. Emil Krastev obviously will be at Sheffield being the world champion, and Russ as well is going to be there, so that's going to be a crazy clash, but having Gustav in the mix would make it that much better. So all eyes will be on Gustav to see if he can reclaim the world record that was just set by Russ. My prediction though, I'm going with Anatoly Novopesmeni to take the bronze medal. Obviously it was kind of between Anatoly, Emil, Gustav and Christian Eindhoven for, which one of those 3 are going to make podium. I'm backing Anatoly to take bronze. He's got the lowest deadlift out of the 4 of them, so he's going to finish his day before the rest do. And I anticipate that potentially all 3 are going to be pulling to go above him and potentially even displace him from podium. Obviously, Anatoly did not have his best day at Worlds this year. He bombed out on deadlifts when he opened with 345, which is pretty much his top end deadlift is like 340 to 350. And he opens with 345 and misses it on grip 3 successive times. Had he have got that though, that would have put him on I think 930 or 932.5 on his opening deadlift. Granted, it had no business being his opener given that he missed it on grip 3 times. But he was still looking pretty strong on that day. I think he'll do enough to hold off at least one out of Emil and Christian Eindhoven, who are threatening to place above him. So I think he takes the bronze medal here. In second place, Emil Norling does it again and beats Anatoly on his final pull. So Christian Eindhoven, I think, is not going to make podium. He definitely has potential to, and I think he might even load the deadlift he needs to pull himself above Anatoly. I just think it won't be quite there. I mean, if you give him that deadlift at Worlds, which he came so close to locking out, that would have been 894 at 93. GL points wise, that would put him pretty much neck and neck with Anatoly if Anatoly totals high 930s, 940 as a 105. So, it'll be close, but I think Anatoly would just edge it and it will force Christian to load too much on the day. However, he's not going to force Emil to load too much on the day. The reason why I say does it again is because Emil and Anatoly have had quite a rivalry at several Worlds and several Euros, and they're pretty much going back and forth. I'm pretty sure Emil has beaten Anatoly twice at 2 Euros, and Anatoly has beaten Emil 2 or 3 times at several World Championships. So they're pretty close together. I think this time Emil Norling is going to do it again and get that win over Anatoly and finish in silver with his much bigger final deadlift than Anatoly has. But in first place, Gustav Hedlund wins. That is not a shocking prediction at all. I don't think he breaks Ross's world record though. Like I said, that is the big storyline here. Pretty much everyone expects Gustav to win. And I just think he's not quite going to get the world record. I don't know what the conditions are going to be like on the day, but the flights are pretty damn small and pretty short. So I don't know if it's exactly going to be conducive to a strongest ever performance. Gustav is definitely strong enough to hit 918. Whether or not he does it on this day, I'm going to go with no. I think he's not going to be able to put it together here. I think he does get the win and walk away as the inaugural World Games champion for the first year that World Games went raw for powerlifting, which is pretty cool. But I don't think he beats 918 that Ross set. Now, what that means in terms of Sheffield wildcards, I don't know. Are they still going to favor him for a wildcard? Probably not, because, I mean, I know if you're going by potential, he definitely deserves to be there. But if you're just going by the total he put up at Worlds, you know, there are other lifters that put up a larger percentage of the world record, I believe. And I'm sure there'll be other lifters who come close to or break world records at, you know, upcoming junior worlds or potentially even world games. So I don't know if Gustav will still get a Sheffield invite without breaking the world record, but I mean, I'd love to see him do it and, you know, join Russ at Sheffield if Russ gets it. But I just think Russ's world record is still going to stand in the 93s once Gustav walks off that platform. Okay, on to the women's super heavyweight category. This is the 84s and the 84 pluses grouped together. And our bottom nomination is Bessie O'Brien, who is only 19 years old. And the total you see there, 570, she actually did that back in 2023 at the age of 17. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a pretty big jump in her total, given that she's still so young. Megan Foal is up next, 84 lifter. Has a CrossFit background, which is pretty cool. Danielle Philibert, another Canadian 84. Ziana Azariah, 607 at 84, the silver medalist at Worlds this year, behind only Amanda Lawrence. She did break Amanda Lawrence's deadlift world record at Worlds as well to secure that silver. So it'll be interesting to see if she goes to extend that world record again. Natalie Lalai, fresh off of winning a bronze medal at Worlds this year, 688 kilos, and of course, the world record deadlift. The greatest female deadlifter ever. And again, just like with Ziana, it's going to be interesting to see if she loads up a world record pull. Third nomination is Jewel Tarsi, another super strong, super heavyweight from New Zealand. 672.5 was the total she set when she placed in 4th at Worlds last year. And I think she podiumed at Worlds the year before that. She didn't make it to Worlds this year though. And I haven't been seeing too much of her training either, so I'm not exactly sure where she's at. But hopefully what we don't see at World Games is a situation like we see there, where Natalie Lalai actually out-totals Jewel Tarsi, but finishes below her because of the GL points based on their bodyweight difference. That's sort of the knock against World Games, I guess, and scoring based on formulas, which I get. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of formulas and scoring meets solely based on formulas because of situations like that, especially when it comes to the super heavyweights. You know, if a lower total manages to beat someone with a high total because of a bodyweight difference in the same weight class, it just feels kind of dumb. So hopefully we don't see that happen on the day. But the top 2 nominations are, of course, the greatest super heavyweights the world has ever seen. Sunita Mulu, former strongest woman ever, former world champion and world record holder, and current world champion and world record holder Brittany Schlater coming in with the top nomination. Those totals are absolutely out of this world, and their bodyweights are pretty close together as well. So again, like I said, hopefully we don't see a situation where the lower total actually wins. But those are far and away the biggest women's totals ever done. So when it comes to this weight category, the 1 and 2 are pretty clearly set. Even more so than the heavyweight category with Kalina and Carola. it would be a monumental upset if Sunita or Brittany do not finish 1 and 2. The order in which they finish is completely up for debate and almost a 50-50 call at this point, because they've been going back and forth over the last few years at Worlds and Sheffield's trading victories. But they're definitely going to finish 1 and 2, you would think. And the battle for podium looks like it's between Jewel Tarsi, Natalie Lalai, and Ziana Azariah. And I could see almost any combination going there. Ziana is looking very strong and she has a huge deadlift. Of course, the 84 kilo world record, which isn't that far behind the 84 plus world record. Although Natalie Lalai, with that huge weapon off her final deadlift, is seemingly well placed to make podium, you would think. And like I said, I haven't seen too much of what Jewel Tarsi has been doing in training. But my prediction is Natalie Lalai extends her deadlift record to win the battle for podium. This is the advantage of having the biggest deadlift ever in the sport, because you have the final say. So she's going to have the benefit of loading up what she needs, and I think Sunita and Brittany are going to be well out of reach, but she's going to be able to load what she needs to secure that bronze, and no one's pulling after her, so she, like I said, she will have that final say. I think she gets it. Her training when it comes to deadlifts has been looking pretty good. The grip is probably the only thing. Her deadlift strength is there. It's whether or not she can hold on to the bar. So I guess we'll see. But my money is on Natalie Lalai extending the deadlift world record and walking away with a bronze, just like she did at Worlds this year. As far as 1 and 2, we know it's Sunita and Brittany. I think Sunita Mulu gets revenge and beats Brittany Schlater to win the gold at World Games. So obviously we saw at Worlds this year, Brittany beat Sunita in the process, breaking her world record, which Sunita previously held. And like I mentioned, they've gone back and forth in the last few Worlds and Sheffields. Worlds 2023, you had Brittany win. 2024, Sunita. Obviously this year, Brittany won again. Then you had Sheffield. This year's Sheffield, Sunita ended up getting the win. I think the previous Sheffield was actually Brittany. So they've literally been alternating wins, losses. And I think that pattern continues, because Sunita's training is looking mighty strong. Brittany's is as well, although she has sort of, complained about not potentially feeling the best. And I know her training leading into Worlds was absolutely phenomenal. So compared to that, it looks like she's a bit down, although still obviously coming in super strong. Sunita looks stronger than a prep going into Worlds. She recently squatted 325 kilos, which is nuts. Her bench has been looking good too. I guess the question mark with Sunita is, can she lock out her deadlifts? That was obviously the issue at Worlds, and that's what cost her essentially the win. Although, to be fair, Brittany probably was even the strongest on the day, so likely would not have mattered. But she missed, I think it was a second and a third deadlift Sunita ended up missing, which were kind of harsh calls, but it's that final lockout position. Can she overcome her own mass to actually lock out a heavy deadlift? I think she gets it done though. I'm backing Sunita. If that huge squat shows up and she can lock out her deadlift, then I think she wins, and I reckon she will. Reclaiming her title as the strongest woman ever from Brittany Schlater. And the final weight category, we have the men's super heavyweight, so the 120s and the 120 pluses grouped together. So we have Christophe Bense Budoi, who previously had totaled 900 kilos at 2024 Worlds, where he finished in 6th position, but again, better GL points with that 897.5 total on account of his lower body weight. Lucas Wiseman. Now, he's someone who I'm going to talk more about, because he is, I think, the dark horse for this. I won't go too much into why just yet, but his training has been looking absolutely insane. So 910.5 is his best ever total that he did at 2024 Canadian Nats last year, before I think Bryce Kravchuk ended up beating him at his nationals this year, so he didn't make it to the Worlds team. But yeah, crazy strong in training, and without a doubt, dark horse for the podium, maybe even the win. Then we have Taras Melnichuk, 905 at 120. He has totaled 2.5 kilos more than that at Worlds this year, where he finished in 7th position, although he must have had a heavier body weight, hence the higher GL points there with his 905. Victor Vasquez Hernandez Carrillo, who totaled a huge PB of 930. So that was at Euros this year, where he placed in 3rd in his home country, which was, I believe, over a 20 kilo PB on that day. So he did very well. And if he continues that momentum and carries it into World Games, puts himself in a pretty strong position to fight for that podium. And another 120 above him is Nicolas Perrault, the brother of Clara Perrault, who was in the women's heavyweight category. 935.5 as a 120. He did that at French Nationals last year. He placed second at Euros this year with a 930 total, beating Victor on bodyweight and only losing to Kogo Clement, a fellow Frenchman. But looking very strong as a... actually, no, Kogo Clement was a 105, wasn't he? We'll scratch that. Nonso was the one that was the European champion in the 120s. Regardless, though, Nico Perrault is got a huge deadlift, looks very strong, and again, someone who looks like a pretty strong threat for that podium. But speaking of strong threats for podium, the reigning world champion Etienne Elcher, 962.5, is the total that won him worlds this year, and it looks like he's stronger than that, and potentially has more in him if he needs it. Obviously, on that day, that looked like about all he had, which ended up being enough to walk away with the gold medal at Worlds. Again, what are the conditions going to be like at World Games? Is he going to be in a better position to unleash more of that strength? We'll see. But he's also got a monster deadlift. Obviously, the former world record holder before Nonso beat that with 400 kilos. He pulled 396, I believe. And yeah, Etienne is looking very strong. Hasn't showed us much of his training, so I have no idea where he's at. I assume he's coming in good condition and good shape, but I guess we'll see. And the top nomination is the only super heavyweight, so the only 120 plus, I should say, in this category. Everyone else is 120, and that is Timur Samkaradze. 1087.5 is his best ever total at 160 kilos bodyweight, which placed him silver at 2024 Worlds. Now, notably, of course, we on a story with Timur is after that Worlds performance, he dropped a ton of body weight and went from being around 160 to closer to 130, around 130, 135. And his strength took a pretty big hit in the process. We've only seen him compete once at this lower body weight because he ended up pulling out of Euros where he was supposed to compete. But we did see him at Worlds and he ended up totaling 960 kilos at a body weight of 134. So if you take that performance and you do the GL points math on that, that gives him 106.51, which puts him a pretty long ways down on that nominations list. Now, potential. I mean, again, I don't know what his body weight coming in is going to be. From the recent posts I've seen, which isn't much, I think his body weight is going to be pretty similar. So he's going to be around that probably low 130s mark. Is he going to come in stronger than Worlds and total more than 960? I mean, he did very closely miss his second deadlift, which I believe was a 20 kilo jump. And he had a few other misses on squat and bench as well. So if he has a better day, I still think he has the potential to total 1,000 kilos. The question is, will that be enough to win and make podium? He's the top nomination, but that's a bit misleading because, like I said, we're seeing a pretty different version of Timur these days. But the main fight for podium here looks like it's between Etienne, Nico Perrault, Victor Vasquez Hernandez Carrillo, Timur Samkaradze, and Lucas Wiseman. Even though he's nominated second from the bottom, is a real dark horse here. To take third, though, I think Nico Perrault holds off Timur and Victor to make the podium. Timur and Victor, I think, are the other two lifters who are going to be very close on Nico Perrault's heels. And honestly, it was a pretty tough call between them. Like I said, based on where Timur comes in, even if he comes in at slightly better than his World's performance, that still puts him kind of behind the top 120s here when it comes to GL points, even though he's going to probably out-total them. And between Victor and Nico Perrault, who I was tossing between for the podium here, Nico Perrault, I just think, has a slightly bigger top-end strength at the moment. I know the best kilos are only 5.5 kilos apart, which is not very much at all. But Nico Perrault has the bigger deadlift. He's pulled 380 as what he pulled at Euros, which is huge. When he set his PB total, I think he only pulled 370. So, if he puts all together on day, he has the potential to enter the 940s, potentially even more than that. So, yeah, I think Nico Perrault, out of him and Victor, will have the final say on his deadlift. Timur probably can outpull all of them. The question is, will it be enough for his total based on his body weight? But yeah, Nico Perot, I think, collects a bronze medal for France here. Second place, Lucas Wiseman almost pulls off a shocking upset. That's right, I'm picking Lucas Wiseman for silver. I almost picked him for the win, actually. His training has been nuts. So I know his best total is 910.5, but his best training total that I've seen him put together in the recent months, we've seen a 370 squat, a 200 kilo bench, and a 375 deadlift. Combining those gives him a 945 training total, right? Now, apart from that, we've also seen him attempt 400 kilos on the deadlift, which would match Nonso Chinye's world record. And he pretty much stood up with it, except it was a bit, obviously wouldn't have passed. The lockout was definitely dodgy and knees locking, unlocking. But the fact he had the strength to pretty much entirely stand up with 400 kilos on the deadlift is wild. I think his best competition deadlift is only like 360 or something like that. So maybe even below that. So he's definitely going to take a huge jump when it comes to that. His strength looks through the roof at the moment. Most recent train total he did was 930. Like I said, if you take his best lifts throughout the previous months, it adds up to 945. I think Lucas Wiseman is, with his huge deadlift, he's going to pull himself into the lead and he's going to force Etienne to load up to beat him on his final deadlift, which you would think Etienne is a pretty sizable favorite here, given Teamer is obviously, not quite at his best. And Etienne seemingly has about a 30 kilo gap between him and the rest of the 120s. However, Lucas Wiseman is going to come very close to beating him. I think we see him above 930, and that's going to be enough to beat Victor, to beat Nico Perot, to out GL point Timur Semkaradze, and very nearly take what would be a shocking upset for the gold. But I think Etienne Elchier, like I said, Lucas Wiseman forces him to pull for the win, but Etienne is going to come out and he's going to make it. Etienne is a pretty clutch lifter. We've seen him rally back and come out to hit big deadlifts when faced with adversity at the previous two Worlds. Obviously, Worlds 2024, where he finished in silver behind Bob Matthews. He missed his second deadlift controversially because he stood up with it. He just got it taken away from him for lockout or whatever the infraction was. He came back on his third and he pulled it, and that was a world record at the time of 396 to secure silver. And then obviously at Worlds this year, when he beat Nonso Chinye, who was the pretty heavy favorite at the time, he battled back from missing his opening pull to then hitting 390 on his third, which was enough for the win on that day, which I predicted, by the way. But I am predicting Etienne Elchier to win again, which is definitely a lot more of a sure thing this time than he was at Worlds. But I think Lucas Wiseman is going to make it pretty tough for him. Like I said, Etienne is going to be forced to load up for his final pull, and he's going to need to show up very strong on his deadlift there, because yeah, it's all going to come down to that. I do think he's going to make it though. I think top end strength, he's just going to be too strong on the day for Lucas Wiseman, even though Lucas has been making insane strides in his training. But there you have it. Those are 10 of my predictions for the heavyweight and super heavyweight categories for the men and women at the upcoming World Games. Check out my previous video to see my other predictions that I made for the lightweight and middleweight categories. But let me know what you think, if you agree or disagree, and hopefully no more athletes pull out from World Games between me making these videos, because Panna pulled out after I dropped the last one. Hopefully that doesn't happen again for this one. But we'll find out in a few days how World Games shakes out.